Heart community. Intrinsic experience. Yummy. The song of the heart. Social media. Caution. Ouch. World War III. I hope not. Christ. His life. Community of the heart. Football. Sport. That's the only thing that came to my mind. Nothing profound. Young. Dynamic energy. Gift. Moon. Being. Self and all. Science. Gosh. I'm getting blank. I guess that's the answer. It's absolutely nothing arises. You. Carl Jung? Genius. What's that?
Mythology.
Myth.
Yeah.
Oh, encoded truth. Forest. Place I love to be. Uh-oh. A cold beer. On a warm day. Gift. Necessary. Sacred house. Be careful. What's that?
Meat eating. Eating meat.
Meeting, eat. Oh, wish I didn't have to do it. Wife. Self. Funny little man. There are many, many dangers of teaching, actually. But one of them is unless you're careful, it's easy to start to conform to people's image of you. And it takes a real vigilance to know that as a possibility and to stay connected, I think, to yourself. And yeah, we all want to stay connected to the universal dimension of our being, and the wake aspect of being. But it's our humanity that grounds that in the here and now. And I think it keeps us honest. And with any kind of power, it could be spiritual power or authority or anything like that, I think that's the integrity is the thing that you got to watch for the most. That's what I've found, because it's an inherently unhealthy place to be. Too much power is not healthy for anybody. And so I think, to me, there's got to be a way in which one stays forever conscious of that fact. That you're that you're not ingesting it. It may be in the atmosphere, in the sense of like a retreat, right? I come up, I teach, I sit down, I do what I do. People see me however they see me. But that whole thing isn't where, that's not where I live, because that can give its own image, even if it's never spoken. It's very easy to give that an image. And so I've always been somebody that's been, I think, kind of comfortable with just the human part of me. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. Not that it doesn't have its fault and its foibles and all the rest, but anyway, to me, I've always found that's a great protector against arrogance, against abuse, against a lot of things. There's nothing like staying in touch with the humility of our humanity, that sort of, just that, I think, it protects us. And just as importantly, it takes other people from us, which is really important. Yeah. Well, the only thing that kind of sort of lasted with me just before we went into this last question is the science one, when I hesitated, Right. And of course that brings up the question for me, anything, like what's that hesitation? Like what's going on there? That something did immediately pop up. And right before you asked this last question, is what I realized was what did come up was ambivalence. And I think that feels like, and maybe like the pause was a sort of an embodiment of that ambivalence. Ambivalence in the sense that I'm very aware and very appreciative in so much that science has brought us. It's brought us most of what we think of as modern life, these tremendous, tremendous benefits. And it's also had this tendency to disconnect us at the same time, that it opens so much up. It can disconnect us from ourselves because it operates in that logical, discriminating part of our psyche that's so useful and so powerful, and yet it's one of those things that's a double-edged sword, and that I see how it can disconnect us from our direct experience of being. And so I guess that's why there's that ambivalence. Like, I like it, I see the consequence of it, both good and bad, and so that's probably the ambivalent attitude. It's not something I would want to do without. That's for sure. I wouldn't want to do without, like, what informed science, which was when it broke away from the belief system of religion. I mean, it kind of grew out of religion, actually, but it got out of control. It's like the genie got out of the bottle, and then the truth asking and the exploration of reality became bigger than the religion was, right? So the religion felt under threat, of course, by that, and in the end, the science has kind of won that battle to a great degree. And I think there's something really important and good, that truth-seeking is no longer limited to a given perspective, even a religious perspective. But I'm not so sure that we've really breathed in the incredible responsibility that places on each of us as individuals. Like it's a neutral tool, and I think we need to bring more consciousness to how we're using that tool. Because we can obviously evolve enough to make a nuclear bomb much faster than we evolve the ethic of knowing really what to do with it. So our technology is often quite a bit ahead of our other parts of our development, and I think we're not going to slam the brakes on it, nor should we. But I think it would be useful if we all became more conscious of that ever-growing gap between the power of technology and just our own evolution as a species, of how to use it in a wise way, how to use it in a benevolent way, and not just benevolent for human beings, but benevolent for everybody. So all that's a way of, for me, unpackaging probably that pause and that word ambivalence, that I feel about it. Yeah. And yet I think the questioning behind it, almost like the logic and the rigorous discipline of truth seeking, is oddly it's the heart of spirituality too. Like, to keep us out of fantasy or our own stories or our own sort of inner mythologies. We need to utilize that part of ourselves will hold ourselves to a kind of rigorous account of truth over falsehood. So ideally, in some odd way, it can evolve faster than us as science, but we have this really important gift of the discriminating part of the intellect is a big aid in spirituality. It kind of holds us to account, keeps us honest if we know how to use it. Yeah. Well, yes and no. Yes, in the sense that in our ultimate dimension of our being, there's no thought, there's no construct. It's prior to all the thought and emotion, even feeling. It's sort of this ground that isn't part of the construct. But of course, this doesn't mean that we shouldn't form a construct, right? Because myth is a carrier of truth. In its best sense, in its highest form. And even our sort of personal myths, the narratives we have in our head, we have to not be so quick to just label them as just narrative and dismiss it. Because even a narrative that may not actually end up being truth or a full statement of truth, there's often some seed of some important information there that may not be the same as the narrative, but it's carrying a truth, because most of the stories we have, they're based from experience, and again, we can say conditioning and then just, it's just conditioning, and try to dismiss it. But even in conditioning, there's often some seed of information, something we're holding that's valuable to us. And when we can see what's really valuable, even in the midst of our personal narrative and our story and all of that's so easy to dismiss, we don't really dismiss them until we really get the truth that's within the illusion. I think that's one of the most fascinating things, that even within our greatest sort of illusions, when we're kind of deluding ourselves or something, that there's often a seed of something that's true, that's real. And so I think we can't just casually dismiss all of our thoughts as mere thoughts, or our narrative as mere narrative. That first we got to find, is there something in there that's true and valuable for me that I don't want to throw out just by dismissing, the narrative. Like, for example, someone could have a narrative of that they're really angry about something. Maybe they had a discussion with somebody and they triggered some anger or whatever. But the thing is, and then a narrative gets going that in their mind. They may try to dismiss it over and over, but the anger just keeps coming back and recycles and recycles. But for that person to get angry, it means they had to care about something. Something must have been important to them. Yes, they went into maybe unnecessary reaction and all the rest, but there's something that's important. Maybe something important felt offended or underappreciated or not acknowledged or not understood. But when we can see, what did I hold as deeply important enough to get angry about, and important enough that I can't let go of the anger, sometimes until I find out what that is, you know? And so I find out, you're angry, you find out, well, this is the important kernel. I cared enough to get angry, because we don't get angry about things we just don't give a damn about. And so this is kind of an example of what I mean, when we can find the thing that we care deeply about and get it up and allow it to become conscious and recognize it and acknowledge it. And in doing that, when we can recognize it, when we can acknowledge it in a really clear way, it's odd how that emotional feeling of demand that other people recognize it and acknowledge it kind of disappears, because we've become clear about what's important and maybe even a deeper truth for us. So that's just an example of why it's not always a good idea just to dismiss narrative as mere narrative, or repetitive thinking as just, there's a reason it's repetitive, and there might be something in it that's an important piece of information for you. That has to do back with the logical mind part. I mean, not that you're going to access that necessarily just in your logical mind. You got to get in your heart. You got to get in your gut. But it's the mind that has that ability to go, hey, let me look at this. Let me hold this experience up, my feeling up into the light of my awareness, and see if there's something in it that I'm not really conscious of, something of value. Don't just assume that because I'm angry, there's nothing of value. These are almost like a scientific kind of questioning, right? You're imposing a kind of discipline. You're looking to the evidence of your own experience to tell you what's really true about that moment, about what you valued, what you didn't value. Head meets heart, I guess you could say. Yeah, because we can't just cut off our head. Our head and our heart meet. In Zen, they call that prajna, which is often translated as heart wisdom. And I've often do a little further translation as the wisdom that naturally arises from our sense of wholeness. And that has a lot to do with heart, because heart is wholeness, it's all inclusive. And the idea of wisdom disconnected from the wholeness of the heart, then wisdom gets harsh and strident, and it's like it loses its other half. It loses its benevolent connection to the whole.